Number 3.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and reads, what reports has he received on the government's financial position?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, yesterday the Treasury issued the Crown accounts for the first 4 months of the financial year. They show that the impact of the Canterbury earthquake and lower than expected tax revenue contributed to a higher than forecast $4.4 billion operating deficit in the period. The $1.1 billion lower than forecast tax take for the period was largely the result of lower than expected business profits and lower GST as New Zealanders spend less and save more. This drop in revenue was partially offset by $440 million lower than forecast government expenditure, showing the merits of government control over spending and the need for ongoing fiscal discipline.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance. What steps is the government taking to manage its finances responsibly?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the government will continue to focus right across the activities of the Crown on reducing low priority and ineffective spending and redirecting that spending to frontline services and more worthwhile initiatives. We're also committed to capping future new budget spending at $1.1 billion per year, adjusted for inflation. As a result, the deficit over the next couple of years might be a bit higher than previously forecast, but government deficits will, from this year on, begin to shrink.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance. What measures will the government consider next year to ensure agencies operate more efficiently?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the government has taken a pretty considered approach to our objective of achieving better public services for less resources. And over the last couple of years, all government agencies have had to learn a lot more about how their organisations run, what costs drive their budgets, and how they're going to improve their services to the public. Over the next couple of years, we would expect to see, as a result of that greater understanding and tools that the government has given them to use, we would expect to see considerable and significant change across most government agencies as they aim to provide more services for less money.
Craig Foss.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister. What alternative approaches to managing the government's finances would lead to bigger budget deficits and more debt?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I have seen some alternatives, expensive spending promises and a return to bloated bureaucracy, tax increases, borrowing on world finance markets to invest in world share markets, borrowing another $250 million to take GST off fruit and vegetables, and not taking dividends from electricity SOEs. But I am confused about whether these are the policies of David Cagle or David...
The Honourable
Speaker, you've ruled several times, Mr Speaker, that the obviously desperate minister over there cannot answer a question, particularly a patsy.
The member will assume his seat. Order, and there'll be no comment here. I'm afraid the member just blew his point of order. I think we'd probably heard sufficient answer. Order.
I hadn't finished.
Order. I think the order. I think the member indicated a range of policy possibilities that would have a negative impact. That's what he was asked, and I believe the House heard a fairly lengthy list. And I think that should be the end of that one. That's supplementary. The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr. Speaker,
supplementary question.
Does the Minister agree with the policy of Labour's finance spokesman, David Cagle, that state-owned assets should be partially privatised? If not, why not?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, perhaps one of the reasons that the Leader of the Opposition is confused as to whether he's working with David Cunliffe or David Cagle is because I think the second David announced the other day that Labor is now interested in partial privatisation, and that might explain why Phil Goff called him David Cagle.
Order. The House is having a bit of fun, but a point of order is being raised by the Honourable
Mr Speaker, only to state the obvious, the Minister has ministerial responsibility for neither David, and this one's got more hair.
Order.
Thank you.
Order. 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 Now, the House has had a bit of fun. We'll come back to order. The question asked an opinion. It was highly marginal. I accept that. The answer was in reasonably good humour. But if there are no... second supplementary, the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Speaker, to the Minister of Finance, does the Minister support Phil Goff's pledge to cut national debt at a faster rate than the present government? And if so, what steps is he taking to speed up his current slow progress?
Point of order, the Honourable Darren Hughes.
The Minister is not responsible for any pledge made by any person in this House other than ministers.
It's an interesting... I'll hear the Honourable Rodney Hyde very briefly.
Mr Speaker, the question was actually asking the Minister of Finance whether he agreed. And support, certainly the Minister has responsibility for whether he supports a policy or not.
Order. The member raised an interesting point, and the dilemma I have as Speaker is questions seeking opinions are allowed under the standing orders these days, and what in essence the Honourable Sir Roger Douglas has asked the Minister of Finance for his opinion, whether he supports a claimed statement of the Leader of the Opposition. And I think the Minister would need to be a little careful in answering it, not to go too far over the top in expressing his opinion, because it is marginal. But opinion questions are allowed, but he should be a little careful in answering it. The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I do support Mr Goff's undertaking, but I can't understand how he's going to do it by spending more money, which I understand is the rest of his policy.
Question number 4, the Honourable Annette King.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.